strange that so many people, when they're trying to improve in reading, don't even meet the basic requirement of volume to improve. It's just such a simple, logical thing that you need to do more practice problems in order to improve, but people don't even meet that baseline. But once you do meet that, how do we make our strategy the most effective so we can improve more than anybody else putting in the same work as us? Hi, I'm Karthik. This is the best way to improve your reading score. Let's get right to it. So December is coming up. It's less than a month away. How do we improve our score in the fastest way possible, in the most effective way, so that we can get the highest score on the last paper SAT ever? All right, the basic requirements. I'm going to go over this because you should already be doing this, but it's just something that you need to be doing for my strategies to work, right? This is the foundation and the baseline. If you're not able to pay attention to the entirety of the video, just pay attention to this part and you're going to be better than probably 50% of people who are preparing for the exam doing probably the same thing as you. So if you don't do these things specifically, it's just not going to work. Very first thing, volume. I get so many questions in the comments, right? How much do I do? Is X amount per day okay? Is that going to get me the score that I want? And to that, I only have one response for all of them. Do as much as you can. It's such a basic idea that, just imagine, right? The SAT's effect on your life. Just let's say the effect duration is this big. The amount of time that you have to prepare for the SAT would be the space between my fingers. Why would you cut down that specific amount of time if it has such a huge effect? Do as much as you can. It's less than a month away, and it's literally the exam that's going to predict what college you're going to get the chance of getting into. Why are you going to specifically limit the amount of prep you can do to a certain amount of time per day? Do as much as you can every single day for the next 20 days, and you're definitely going to see an improvement, and you're going to improve as much as you possibly could in that time frame. So you're going to have no regrets with how much you're able to get your score with. All right, the second thing is you must be using accurate practice. If you're practicing high volume, but of work that's not essentially what the SAT is going to be about, you're almost preparing for a different exam in its entirety, right? So for accurate practice sources, the only sources are going to be from College Board itself, because there's very specific requirements that they have for every single question type. And you just need to make sure that you're fitting those requirements, right? And by requirements, I mean the questions follow those requirements. You just take them and then do them well, and that's how you're going to be following it, right? So the sources are like Khan Academy, right? They're a College Board partner, right? And on top of that, you have the question bank, right? And that's just questions from old previous exams. But I only focus on the question bank at the very end because the question bank has questions that could come up on QAS and practice exams. And you don't want to essentially ruin those tests before you take them. So the SAT practice exams, do all of them. All of them should be done by now, right? If you've been practicing for more than a month. And also look at QASs, right? Which are released forms of exams. You can find them online. It's just going to take a little bit of effort. The SAT Reddit might have some in there, but they get quickly taken down. You just have to look like pretty extensively to find them. All right. And full length and review, right? Practice doing sections in their entirety, right? And if you're unable to meet the time requirement, right, you go over the time, use a stopwatch, figure out how much time you're taking, but don't limit yourself just because you're not able to fit the time of the exam. Do the full duration of the thing, dedicate serious time to every single question and review it. That is the key thing of building strategies that so many people don't do, is review it. So if you're following all of these and honestly doing a little bit of review, you're going to be better than the huge majority of people even putting in the same amount of time of work as you, right? Okay, so let's go to the idea of how do you review so you actually improve, right? And I'll say the very basic thing of the split, right? How much review should I do in comparison to how much testing I should do, right? Because ultimately, it's reviewing that gives you the improvement. A significant amount of improvement comes from review versus testing itself, right? And honestly, giving you a split would not be helpful. I've given splits in the past about how much review and how much prep you should do towards the end of the exam, so to optimize your learning. And that's a very general guideline, but honestly, it's as long as the review takes. As long as it takes you to review the exam and fully build a proper strategy and test your strategies and go through all the questions that you need to properly ask yourself, that's how long it should take. Don't worry about a split. Just prioritize the review and make sure you do it thoroughly, because that's how you improve, right? Okay, reviewing. The questions you need to review in every single answer, right? So every time you get a question wrong, or you guessed and you actually got the answer right, but you just didn't know why, you need to figure out, why was my answer wrong, right? And if you didn't get it wrong, it would be just, why is this answer correct, right? And if you got it wrong, obviously you have to answer the incorrect portion as well, but why the correct answer is correct, right? On top of that, you need to figure out why is that correct answer even more correct than the answer I put if I got it wrong, right? So you're trying to figure out what specific component makes the correct answer correct. And with this, what you're going to do is identify a certain piece of evidence or logic that's going to make the answer correct, right? So your answer choice that you pick is going to be less correct than a answer choice that is actually correct due to some specific thing. Identify exactly what that thing is, right? It's going to be some form of text, some misinterpretation, some logic, some evidence. It's going to be something, right? Making the strategy. How can I make sure I always get the thing? Right. So, and what I mean by get the thing is like what evidence point that you identified. How do I make sure that I've always read it? I always understand it. I don't make the same mistakes last time that is going to make me get the answer choice wrong. I'm going to get it correct for the next time. And you need to build a highly specific strategy in order to do that, right? And let's say there was a piece of evidence that you just read over and didn't specifically get to, right? And let's say, okay, so to prevent that, I'm just going to read better next time. That's not good enough. You haven't operationalized the specific thing that's going to make you do better. What are you going to do specifically to read better? How are you going to guarantee that outcome? What is the specific thing you can do that's going to make sure you read better, right? And this is probably the hardest part, right? Because you need to come up with a strategy that actually effectively works for you with your very personal problem and specific circumstance. No one is going to be able to give you a custom solution just en masse. They need to know all the specific details of why you're getting them wrong and what specifically you can do. So ultimately, you need to come up with that yourself. Or if you know someone who's good at the SAT, ask them like, what did they do and what would they do in your specific situation, right? Some common strategies, right, that might work for a lot of people that I'll just give out because it might not specifically work for you, but if you tweak it a little bit or modify some components of it, it might, right? Applying a reading method. I'll explain my reading method toward the end and the specific reasons and how you should implement it with your own, if that's even a thing that you should be doing. And on top of that, just specifically doing a reading strategy that makes you read better. So the very common one is the pencil to paper, right? Take your pencil and go over every single individual word as you're reading it. If you find yourself misinterpreting things, not reading completely, because that's going to guarantee that every single word must be read, or your like pencil will be on the wrong word and you'll say the wrong word and they'll immediately trigger something in your head that makes you go back to the right one. Okay. Where these strategies are applicable, keep in mind, right? The idea with these strategies when you're building them is they're only applicable to each question type. You need a different strategy for every type of question, right? And that generally makes sense, right? If I'm using a strategy for like evidence questions, right, where I apply which like answer choice matches most correctly to what piece of evidence, right? That's not going to like same ideas and strategy. That's not going to be applicable to like a main idea question, right? The strategies that you have for every type of question are generally going to be different, right? And what you need to specifically focus on is that you only do one type if you don't have much time left, right? So you're only if you don't have much time left to practice overall, right? Say the exam is coming up, only do one type of question and then move on when you get to 90% accuracy with that type of question, right? But essentially you need a different strategy for every type of question. And also don't just change your strategy because someone else has one that you perceive to be better. Make slight adjustments to your own based on theirs. If yours like tends to work generally and works better than last time or the previous times. And ultimately it's that what improves it, right? It's the idea that you're not completely changing your strategies, but you're just adopting small things if they're accurate. Unless the strategy that you implement is brand new and you find it to be completely wrong, then you can completely scrap yours and try to take on a new one to identify the problem, right? So what did we essentially do with that entire volume strategy building? What did that whole thing really do? What we did is we operationalized learning, right? And what I mean by that is we just made it easy to figure out where we specifically are for every single question type and then how to improve in a linear way, right? How to improve in a way that we can actually track so we can actually do better. And the idea is if we run through as many cycles as possible of testing, like figuring out why I got questions wrong, making the strategy, trying the strategy in the test and doing that again and again, that is what improves your score. It's running through that cycle as many times as possible. That's why I say for volume, right, you need to do it as many times as possible in order for this to work. Because if you just do it once or twice, you've effectively learned nothing, right? And also, even if you don't apply the exact strategy or you don't know an exact strategy, just going through why the correct answer is correct and why the wrong answer is wrong is going to improve you, but just not as fast as like a strategy can, right? What a strategy does, it just squeezes the volume that you do into like the highest you can get out of it. But by putting in the volume and at least at the very minimum, identifying why the correct answer is correct and why your answer is wrong, you're going to improve way significantly more, right? You're just going to improve so much more than other people putting in the same volume as you. And honestly, most people, if you're actually putting in as much volume as you can, are doing less volume than you. So you're going to be strides better than those people already, right? And this is where I'm going to explain my overall reading strategy that has worked for me extremely well. This is how I read, and you have to practice it, right? With a lot of sections in order for it to work well for you, right? If you have time to run like 7 or 8 full entire sections with my strategy, use it, right? If you don't, slightly tweak your strategies to be more similar to mine, right? So don't completely scrap yours. Just get a general idea of how you can change yours to be slightly more like mine. And if your strategy is already similar, feel free to adopt those small changes that will make your strategy almost exactly like mine or extremely, extremely similar, right? Okay, I'll go into it. What I do, right, is I do a full read on my first time around. So I encounter the new passage, I read it fully, right? And I don't like read it fully with this idea that I need to memorize every specific detail or understand everything. All I'm trying to figure out when I do the full read is where the information is, right? In the first paragraph, this happens. In the second paragraph, these two things happen, right? What generally happens and what helps me remembers that is doing a main idea summarization of every paragraph, right? So I'm basically in my head summarizing the main idea of that paragraph, or if it's a story, like what generally happened in that paragraph very quickly, right? And that's going to help me figure out where the info is, not what it is, right? And it's important that the main idea summarization that you make in your head, I never write it down. Some people benefit from writing it down. It's just whatever you think is better for you, whatever doesn't waste time. But basically, the idea is that what you want to specifically do is not focus on the content, but focus on where the content is, right? Deep reads of specific parts on the questions that reference it, right? So if when you're actually looking for the information, you do a deep read of the specific part only when the question references that specific part, right? So remember where exactly it is and the idea summaries that you make, right? So if I'm looking specifically for a deep, like, question, right? It just points out like in this paragraph, in this line, that's when I'm going to go deeply in there and I'm going to know where it is, even if it doesn't reference the line number, just because I've done the main idea summarization of every paragraph. So I know where that info is. And it's probably not just in one place. It's probably in at least 2 or 3. So make sure you do it that. And honestly, for the last one, if you don't struggle with time, it's pretty much irrelevant, but rank the questions. Skip the hardest ones if you struggle with time. Okay. I'm not going to waste your time at the end of the day. Just do this. Start implementing today or tomorrow if you want to see results. If you don't, the chances that you're actually going to remember this or apply them in the future to actually improve your score is just extremely low. You're just going to waste time and you're going to forget what you've learned. So what's the point of this video if you just forget all of that? If you guys are interested in SAT prep, click the link down in the description. I have a very limited amount of spots I can give left. Honestly, within the next 2 weeks, they're probably all going to be full. So apply because the amount of things I can really give out is just so little. So apply as soon as possible. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.